Hi, I'm Angeline. I'm out at El Morro and looking at the petroglyphs that are left here at the park, and I'm racing against a school group that's behind me, so I'm going to talk fast. Behind me are some of the Native American inscriptions. Now, the word for this place by the Zuni is called Atsinna. Atsinna. The word Atsinna refers to a kind of a meaning that means something like visual imagery. And I know it's a big hobby of fans of rock art to have a big debate about whether this should be called rock art, petroglyphs, pictograph, images, whatever. The natives are not particularly fussy about this argument. To them, it is visual imagery. And that's because they know that they did not have writing. They're an oral tradition. And these on the rocks are called visual imagery, Atsinna. The Spanish came up and they did their darndest to subdue and conquer the Zuni, but the Zuni, it didn't work. The Zuni were so organized and so consolidated and so unified and on their own land and such a huge population that there was just no go in the colonization department. But they allowed the Spanish to stay and they do their thing, and as you can see, they weren't terribly bothered by the Zuni because they left lots of markings on the rock from starting in about the year in the 1500s all the way up through the 1800s. Colonists and people passing through, Spanish origin, of Anglo origin, they all came through here and they left their marks on the rocks, and apparently the Zuni didn't bother too much about them. This is all Zuni land. They allowed the Spanish to build churches on their territory, and to this day, even some, I'm calling them Zuni, but even some Ashiwi attend the Christian schools, but they remain Zuni and they still practice, or they remain Ashiwi and they still practice their own religions and their own customs and their own lifestyle, very much as they always have. A lot of these are just kind of like graffiti or markers, memorials of people's own selves, colonists, Spanish colonists who passed through here. So this one says, Andres Romero passed through here in the year 1774. And there's a few on this panel that's like that. So I like this one a lot. This is a Peachy Breckenridge. He was a man in charge of 25 camels used by Lieutenant Beale in 1857. So this is written by a Spanish passer through, and it's written in Spanish, but it says, on the 25th of the month of June of this year of 1709, Ramon Garcia Jurado passed through here on the way to Zuni. So this inscription says, in Spanish of course, but I'll translate it, in the year 1776, on the 26th of August, Don Feliz Martinez, governor and captain general of his kingdom, and the Reverend Father Antonio Carmago, custodian and ecclesiastical judge, passed by here to the conversion and conquest of the Moki. That's the Hopi. So they tried, and the Hopi said, nope. And 2 months later, sent him packing back to Santa Fe. The calligraphy in a lot of these is really quite beautiful. For etching into such a hard surface. This one even has a little bit of artistry accompanying it. like this has tiny little rooms, but these little rooms are not where you spend most of your time. This would be sleeping. Some activities would happen here, probably mostly during the winter. The rest of the time you'd be spending your time in the courtyard areas, out in nature. You'd be doing something. You'd be either outdoors, making something, gathering something, hunting something, mining something, traveling, trading, working on your crafts, but in the outdoors courtyard areas, or even on the roofs, the indoor areas, protection, storage, sleeping. When history's long, it becomes ever more complicated. So these ruins are a pueblo that's on Ashiwi land, Zuni. And even though that's the case, Navajo believe these to be their ruins as well. The Ashiwi would say, no, that doesn't make any sense. The Diné say, yes, these are part of our ruins. I was just speaking to a woman down the trail. She was part of the school group, and she was a chaperone who was waiting for one of the students to come back down the trail because some of the people believed that to visit a place like this, an ancestral place, is sacrilege, and you're not to go in the vicinity of it. And this girl felt strongly that this would be the case, and she did not want to go to these ruins. She would only go up to a certain point on the mesa, and then she was going to head back down the trail. So this chaperone I was speaking to was waiting for the girl. I saw the girl come down, and she looked pretty cranky about the whole thing. She looked very disturbed. She was on her way down to the chaperone. So when I was out with a Navajo guide a few days ago, he was explaining that the Navajo wouldn't have lived in an ancestral place of the ancestral Puebloan, because you don't know whose spirits are left there, an abandoned place. I think that's different than if you have commingled with the local population and actually have your own ancestors or your own people living in this place. The division of this political line that some people will and won't cross is because the ancestral Puebloans have a history on this land that goes back time immemorial. But the Athabascans only came in around the year 1100, and this is the people that became the Navajo, the Diné. And so the old timers will tend to kind of draw a hard line in the sand and say these are not ancestral Puebloan people. The Navajo, however, have a different perspective, and they consider themselves to be ancestral Puebloan people, part of this people. This ruins is part of their heritage. This woman was explaining to me that even amongst your own people, you have different people who have different perspectives on history, and then they also have different perspectives on how the stories are told. And the stories don't always match archaeology, and you have to decide which story you're going to go along with. Everybody's different, but the communities find a way to be peaceful with one another by simply being respectful. So the reason that the circular kiva is the original form of kiva is because the basket makers lived in pit houses. This was pre-Pueblo times. They lived in pit houses. And as the Pueblo era, as agriculture became more and more prevalent, the societies became bigger and bigger, needed to accommodate more people. And so they started building these Pueblo-style buildings on top of the pit houses. This was the custom, to build on top of the home of your forebears. And the ancestral style of home became the holy place. It became the kiva. And then as time went on, agriculture became more and more prevalent. The societies became bigger and bigger. The communities became bigger, to where at Atsinna Pueblo, for example, there were 350 rooms at this Pueblo. The population was enormous. And so the buildings needed to get bigger. There was a prophecy that the buildings should be built one on top of another, and that the holy person should live at the top of the Pueblo, so he could be closest to the sky and to the Holy Spirits when he goes to sleep at night and when he wakes up in the morning. And so these were to be built like a beehive or an anthill structure. And it's much like the pyramids of Central America. The only difference is in Central America, the pyramids were purely sacred ceremonial centers, and in Pueblo, North American Southwest, the pueblos were pyramids that people lived in. When you're trying to construct an 8-story pueblo, constructed like a beehive or an anthill, it's inconvenient to have a round structure, so the structure had to change. The structure became square rooms, and ergo, the kiva became square. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it was informative. I support this channel with the sale of the bead art that I make in the style of the Huichol of Mexico. And these are a few items that I have available just for example. All items are available at theancientsouthwest.com. Click on Art for Sale. Thank you very much, and may the fire inside you continue to burn brightly.